Did you know Lesotho is the world's biggest country that's inside another country? Did you also know that Brazil has the highest amount of different animal species? Did you know Sweden is 2/3 forest? Did you also know that there are more sheep in Uruguay than actual people? Did you know Lake Malawi in Malawi makes up almost 25% of the total country size? Did you also know that Georgia has the deepest cave in the world, which is 2.2 kilometers deep? Did you know America has the world's largest coal reserves? Did you also know that Qatar has no forests? Did you know St. Lucia is the only country named after a woman? Did you also know that Saudi Arabia is the largest country without rivers? Did you know Morocco was the first country to recognize the United States independence? Did you also know that Nepal has the lowest average IQ, only being 42.99? Did you know Andorra hasn't been involved in any war? Did you also know that Chad is the largest landlocked country in Africa? Did you know Iceland is growing at a rate of 5 centimeters per year? Did you also know that the United Arab Emirates has the world's biggest shopping mall? Did you know Nauru is the world's most obese country? Did you also know that the United States gets the most tornadoes? Did you know Canada has the world's longest coastline? Did you also know that Chad has the lowest life expectancy with just 53 years? Did you know the world's biggest city in the world is in China with a land area greater than the UK? Did you also know that Kiribati is the only country in the world that is on 4 hemispheres? Did you know the Netherlands has more bikes than people? Did you also know that Andorra is the biggest country in the world without an airport? Did you know Mexico's capital, Mexico City, is the highest elevated capital in North America? Did you also know that Senegal is one of the most politically stable countries in Africa? Did you know Saudi Arabia accounts for about 20% of the world's oil reserves? Did you also know that Czechia is home to over 2,000 castles, more than any country in Europe? Did you know 1 in 3 people who live in Monaco are millionaires? Did you also know that Tuvalu is made of coral? Did you know there are more horses than humans in Mongolia? Did you also know that India invented shampoo? Did you know Ireland is more northern than Northern Ireland? Did you also know that Bangladesh has a higher population than all of Russia? Did you know Qatar is the world's safest country? Did you also know that UAE has the world's longest driverless metro system, which is 32 miles? Did you know Uruguay is the nation with the world's longest anthem? Did you also know that Brazil represents almost 50% of South America's total population? Did you know there is 1 beekeeper for every 200 people in Slovenia? Did you also know that Mexicans drink the most Coca-Cola per capita? Did you know there are 2.24 pigs for every human in Denmark? Did you also know that Canadian people are the most well-educated, with over 56% of them having a degree? Did you know Liechtenstein produces the most false teeth, accounting for 20% of the world's production? Did you also know that the oldest living tree planted by a man was planted in Sri Lanka about 2,300 years ago? Did you know Kazakhstan produces the most uranium in the world? Did you also know that Czechia drinks the most beer with 142.6 liters per capita? Did you know Malta is the smallest EU state in terms of size and population? Did you also know that Finland has a lake inside of it that's shaped like Finland? Did you know the city of Yakutsk in Russia is the coldest city in the world? Did you also know that Iran received the worst snowfall in history when it snowed 26 feet? Did you know Iceland has the world's most northern capital? Did you also know that Germany has the only highway in the world with no speed limit, the Autobahn? Did you know India has the world's highest railway bridge? Did you also know that chewing gum is illegal in Singapore? Did you know Taiwan is the happiest country in East Asia? Did you also know that Afghanistan has the lowest life expectancy in Asia? Did you know the easternmost point of Brazil is closer to Africa than the westernmost point of Brazil is to the easternmost point of Brazil? Did you also know that Egypt is located on 2 continents, Africa and Asia? Did you know South Africa has 3 capitals? Did you also know that Morocco holds about 80% of the world's phosphate? Did you know Denmark has the oldest continuous monarchy in Europe spanning over 1,000 years? Did you also know that the snow globe was invented in Austria? Did you know Algeria is the largest country in Africa? Did you also know that Lesotho has the world's highest pub in Africa, being 9,429 feet above sea level? Did you know Saudi Arabia accounts for about 20% of the world's oil reserves? Did you also know that Czechia is home to over 2,000 castles, more than any country in Europe?
Did you know in South Korea, when a baby is born, they are classified as 1 year old? Did you also know that Indonesia's island, Java, is home to over 139 million people, thus making it the most populated island? Did you know the tallest tree houses in the world are located in Laos? Did you also know that Cambodia celebrates New Year's in April? Did you know Sri Lanka produces 80% of the world's cinnamon? Did you also know that the Maldives has an average elevation of 1.5 meters 5 feet? Did you know Pakistan is the world's cheapest country to live in? Did you also know that India has one of the lowest divorce rates? Did you know Azerbaijan has a gas fire that's been burning continuously for 4,000 years? Did you also know that Uzbekistan is a double landlocked country? Did you know China gets the most hurricanes annually? Did you also know that Bhutan's capital has no traffic lights? Did you know Halloween was invented in Ireland? Did you also know that Italy has the most UNESCO World Heritage Sites?
Did you know Andorra's military budget is dependent on donations? Did you also know that Kiribati is the first country to celebrate New Year's? Did you know about 1/3 of all airports in the world are located in the US? Did you also know that Japanese watermelons are squares? Did you know France is the most visited country with an average of 77.7 million tourists per year? Did you also know that Australia is wider than the moon? Did you know Slovakia invented the world's first flying car? Did you also know that Colombia has 10% of the world's biodiversity?
Did you know Morocco is the only kingdom in North Africa? Did you also know that Kiribati is the first country to see the sunrise? Did you know Greece has more tourists yearly than its actual population? Did you also know that Iceland is the last place to be colonized on Earth? Did you know Cuba has the most doctors per 1,000 people? Did you also know that El Salvador is the most densely populated country in South America? Did you know Armenia is the first country to adapt Christianity as its state's religion? Did you also know that Belgium is the most urbanized country in Europe? Did you know San Marino is the oldest country in Europe? Did you also know that Chad is the largest landlocked country in Africa? Did you know Vietnam has the world's largest cave? Did you also know that 40% of East Timor's population is under 15? Did you know the Solomon Islands' official language is English, although only 1% can speak it? Did you also know that Nauru is the least visited country? Did you know Azerbaijan has the world's oldest drilled oil well? Did you also know that Turkey has the world's first temple? Did you know Burundi is the world's poorest country by GDP per capita? Did you also know that Luxembourg is the world's richest country by GDP per capita? Did you know 60% of the world's lakes are located in Canada? Did you also know that chocolate was invented in Guatemala? Did you know Andorra has 2 princes? Did you also know that the first person to be born on Antarctica was Argentinian? Did you know Pakistan has the world's only fertile desert? Did you also know that Paraguay is the most positive country in the world? Did you know Ivory Coast is responsible for 1/3 of the world's cocoa beans? Did you also know that El Salvador was the first country to recognize Bitcoin as a currency? Did you know the Netherlands is the tallest country in the world? Did you also know that 70% of Spain is empty? Did you know there are 1.7 kangaroos per person in Australia? Did you also know that Bangladesh has a higher population than all of Russia? Did you know North Macedonia has the oldest lake in Europe? Did you also know that Niger is home to the highest birth rate in the world, which is 7 babies per woman? Did you know New Zealand has twice as many cows as humans? Did you also know that Peru has more than 70% of the world's alpacas? Did you know Greece's population has the highest smoking rate in all of Europe at 42%? Did you also know that Ireland occupies 80% of the island? Did you know Japan experiences an average of 2,000 earthquakes annually? Did you also know that Thailand is the only country in Southeast Asia to never be colonized by a European power? Did you know the bagel was invented in Poland? Did you also know that Iceland uses the most antidepressants out of any country in the world? Did you know Switzerland has enough shelters in the country to store its entire population? Did you also know that the United States is home to the world's tallest tree, which is 275 feet tall? Did you know Denmark has the oldest flag still in use? Did you also know that Nauru is the only country without a capital? Did you know in Turkey there is a city called Batman? Did you also know that the current flag of the United States was designed by a student? Did you know the Philippines' capital city, Manila, is the most densely populated city in the world? Did you also know that Scotland's national animal is a unicorn? Did you know in Tonga most businesses are closed on Sunday? Did you also know that in 2018, Turkmenistan's president banned all black cars because he thought it was ugly? Did you know Mauritius is the only country in Africa that is majority Hindu? Did you also know that the first person to climb Mount Everest was from New Zealand? Did you know in Bhutan it is completely illegal to kill any animals? Did you also know that Jamaica's flag is the only one in the world that doesn't contain red, white, or blue? Did you know China has over 100 cities with more than 1 million people? Did you also know that Suriname is 94% covered by forest? Did you know Costa Rica technically doesn't have an army? Did you also know that Suriname has only 2 movie theaters in the entire country? Did you know El Salvador is the only country in North America to not have an Atlantic coastline? Did you also know that people from Finland drink, on average, a quart of milk per day? Did you know India has the longest constitution, with it being over 145,000 words long? Did you also know that Mauritius is the only African nation to be majority Hindu? Did you know for every person in Vietnam, there are 0.66 motorcycles? Did you also know that China has the most reclaimed land out of the sea? Did you know Brazilians take the most showers with an average of 2 per day? Did you also know that Lake Baikal in Russia contains more water than the Great Lakes combined? Did you know Japan has the strongest passport, granting access to 193 countries? Did you also know that the US has 8 parking spaces for every single car on the road? Did you know Canada has more lakes than all other countries combined? Did you also know that Venezuela is home to the tallest waterfall, which is over 10 times higher than Niagara Falls? Did you know Chile has volunteer firefighters and they don't actually get paid? Did you also know that some college campuses are bigger than the Vatican City? Did you know Indonesia has the largest population of Muslims in the world? Did you also know that China consumes the most electricity out of any country in the world? Did you know New Zealand's capital, Wellington, is the southernmost capital in the world? Did you also know that Iceland's capital, Reykjavik, is the northernmost capital in the world? Did you know Germany is the richest country in Europe with a GDP of 4.1 trillion? Did you also know that the UK is home to Europe's most Nobel Peace Prizes at 137?